Hello, I'm Dr. Barbara Ciccarelli. I'm a relationship success coach, and I'm going to give a workshop on thriving without a mentor, power, boundaries, and self-led growth at work. This is a reflective workshop for professionals navigating growth in the absence of guidance. So, thriving without a mentor. I'm coming out of Amsterdam, the Netherlands. As you probably know, a lot of positions in careers or in school have a mentor of some kind, but not all careers unfold with mentorship. In some mentorship relationships, there's never even a discussion or conversation, so some unfold in silence. In some cases, the mentor competes with the mentee. Somewhere guidance is implied, but never offered. But this workshop is not about blame. It's about understanding power so you can grow without shrinking yourself. So in my practice as a coach, I pair up a coffee hour with a workshop. The coffee hour is a conversation about the topic, and then I go deeper into the topic in the workshop and have a actual PowerPoint like I have now. So with the coffee hour, we focused on recognition, shared experience, and validation. This workshop focuses on sense making, pattern recognition, self-led positioning. I want to emphasize that I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach. This is not therapy, this is not training, this is reflective clarity. So, what happens when mentorship is absent or withdrawn? Lack of membership doesn't always look like neglect. It looks like something else many times in many cases. It can look like competing instead of guiding, praise without advocacy, access without protection, and proximity without support. These dynamics are often unnamed, yet shaping. And I want to go a little bit deeper into these four dynamics. Just one moment. Put it up on the screen. Competing instead of guiding. A manager who withholds insight that would help you grow. A senior colleague who positions themselves as the expert rather than developing you. Subtle comparison rather than encouragement. What's really happening? This dynamic often arises when your growth is perceived as a future threat. The person's identity is tied to being the smart one. Power feels insecure rather than shared. How it lands on you. You become more cautious about showing initiative. You second guess visibility. Growth starts to feel risky instead of supported. The second one I brought up, praise without advocacy, what it looks like. You receive positive feedback privately. Compliments that don't translate into opportunity. Being told you're doing great without sponsorship. What's really happening? Praise is being used as emotional currency instead of professional leverage. A way to maintain goodwill without redistributing power. A substitute for actual mentorship. How it lands on you. Confusion about where you stand, hope without traction, the feeling of being almost supported. Almost. Emphasis on almost. Then the third one was access without protection, what it looks like. Inclusion in meanings without backing. Visibility without psychological safety. Exposure without support when things go wrong. What's really happening? You're being given proximity to power, but not the protection that usually accompanies mentorship. How it lands on you. Heightened self-monitoring, fear of making mistakes publicly, pressure to be flawless. Finally, the fourth one, proximity without support, what it looks like. Working closely with someone senior who never truly guides you. Being near decision makers without development conversations. Feeling seen but not held. What's really happening? The relationship appears supportive from the outside but lacks developmental intention, psychological investment, long-term growth orientation. How it lands on you? Self-doubt. Why don't they invest in me? Over-interpreting signals. Quiet withdrawal over time. So as I said, these dynamics are often unnamed, yet shaping. I want to move on to power without language. It brings up intentions, which is a complicated topic itself. Power doesn't need bad intentions to have impact. When power is unclear, expectations stay unspoken. I mentioned this in the very beginning when I talked about with the slide, the first slide on careers lacking mentorship, where expectations aren't clear or they're not stated or there's just not anything to have expectations for. Feedback becomes ambiguous. Growth feels conditional. Confidence becomes self-policed. So what happens internally? Over time, professionals often respond by becoming more cautious. Of course, editing themselves. Remember, this is when they're not getting the guidance. What happens? Performing competence instead of developing it. Because you have to keep up appearances of your position, either in work, we're talking about, of course. Confusing adaptability with self-betrayal. Let's unpack that. Uh, Adapting versus self-betrayal. Are you giving up your self-authority? Or are you adapting? That's what you have to ask, and only you know if you're giving up your self-authority. This is not weakness. It is intelligent self-protection. Let's talk about the invisible cost. Thriving without mentorship, which is what our workshop is about, often carries a quiet cost. Slower visibility. Of course, if you don't have the backing of your mentor is harder to stay visible or increase visibility. Emotional over monitoring. Um, so you're not sure of the situation with the mentor and you don't want to overreact. So you're over monitoring your emotions. Persistent self-doubt despite strong performance. Again, this has to do with your self-authority and maybe giving some of that away to the mentor, and therefore having self-doubt despite a strong performance, despite your achievements. A sense of being almost supported. You never can quite pinpoint it. And the more experience the mentor has with having such relationships, the more this will be the case. You can't quite pinpoint whether you're getting the support or not. Understanding the cost prevents internalization. So recognition is very important. We talked a little bit about this in the coffee hour. Boundary confusion versus boundary clarity. Without guidance, boundaries often become too rigid. I'll do everything alone. This is one way people react to the situation where the mentor is not providing guidance. They don't want to ask for guidance, so they just decide, and they don't want to get into trouble or don't want to be visible, don't want to make a drama. So they just decide they're going to work by themselves and be self-sufficient. Too porous, I'll earn support by overgiving. This is another way to go. Another way people go. They they do the opposite of the self-sufficient first one we talked about, and they try to figure out ways they can get the mentor to give the support. Self-led growth offers a third option, and this is the one I'm recommending. Boundaries rooted in self-trust, not defense. What is self-led growth? Self-led growth is not doing everything alone, which we just discussed was one of the reactions people take. Self-led growth is not rejecting support. It's not becoming detached. But what is it? It is locating authority internally. This is your self-authority. Choosing growth intentionally. Decoupling worth from validation. Engaging power consciously. Let's reframe the question. Instead of asking, why didn't they mentor me? Have you ever gone through that experience where you had not a great experience with a mentor and during and after you asked, why aren't they mentoring me? Let's ask instead, who do I become when guidance is absent? This question restores agency without denial. Let's talk about the identity shift. Thriving without mentorship requires an identity shift. Once you recognize the relationship with the mentor, there's a shift from approval seeking to self anchored, from waiting to orienting, consciously acknowledging the power and the growth, from earning to choosing. This shift is subtle and powerful. Let's have a reflection pause. Take a moment to reflect. Let's ask a few questions. What expectations were never explicitly agreed to? What were you trying to earn? What are you ready to stop internalizing? And you can think about these, you can reflect quietly on these things. Integrating the experience. What happens when you integrate the experience rather than bypass it? You keep your competence, you you release misplaced self-blame, you reclaim direction. Thriving doesn't require the environment to change. I think that's a very important one, so I'll repeat it. Thriving doesn't require the environment to change. It does not require the mentor to change. You cannot fix the mentor. It requires conscious orientation. So, what changes after this workshop? A clearer language for past dynamics. I hope reduced self doubt. Stronger internal authority. You could say a stronger self authority. A calmer relationship to power. Not because answers were given, but because meaning was made. You recognize the situation and you sought for self authority, conscious growth. Thriving without a mentor is not a failure, nor a flaw in you. It is a context that asks for awareness, boundaries, self-led growth. Once named, it no longer defines you. That was the workshop. And I want to go back and just repeat the title, Thriving Without a Mentor, Power, Boundaries, and Self-Led Growth at Work. This recording will be in the recording folder in the classroom, so you can look at it again. I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, if you would like to talk more about it, there are other avenues such as group coaching or one-to-one coaching. And of course, there are going to be more coffee hours and workshops. I also want to point out the Feeling Good coffee hour on Fridays, every other Friday. So if you have any questions, reach out to me. And thank you very much.